Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Kimberly Brown. I'm the head of Humanitarian Policy with the British Red Cross. Thank you very much to all of you who are able to join us here today in the room, and I know we have a number of other colleagues who are joining us via the video link. As many of you will know, it's 14 agencies that have come together, and we really felt the need to highlight the humanitarian situation in Yemen. That's catastrophic. It's the worst humanitarian crisis in the world. I had an opportunity to visit Yemen with the British Red Cross, working with our colleagues across the Red Cross, Red Crescent movement last year. And I was quite shocked from what I saw there and know well that the situation is deteriorating since then. So I think we're very privileged today to have 6 speakers, 3 via video link, and I think the team are working hard at the back to make sure that they can join us. Our colleagues are from across a number of different agencies, and they'll be able to speak to their experiences in country, from recent trips, and across a number of humanitarian issues. So I hope that will give you a good overview of some of the things that we are very concerned about and that we're facing, and really highlight the reason that we've come together to bring more interest and more attention to this very dire situation. So we're going to try to start with 3 colleagues in order via video link, 2 who are in Sana'a, 1 in Hodeida, and then we'll turn to the colleagues that are here with us in the room. We'll be a bit agile and flexible, just in case the technology doesn't come through for us. And I've asked our panelists to keep their remarks to 5 minutes so that we have the opportunity for questions. And we will try to keep this to an hour, so finish latest by 11:15. So we are first going to go, I hope, to speak with Dina El Mamoun, who's OXFAM Head of Policy and Advocacy.
Hello.
And she has lived and worked in Yemen for several years. And she's going to look at internal displacement as a topic. So I hope that we'll be able to have Dina join us. We have everybody here, I think. So Dina, you're there? So we will stick with this, and we'll try it, and we have our I was going to say backup plan, but hopefully we don't need it. Dina, can you hear me? Hello? Hi, Dina, we can see you, and I wonder if you're able to hear us. Okay, what I might do is see, Sukaina, can you hear me? No? And Salem, can you hear me? So I feel that our colleagues maybe are not able to hear us, or I don't think they're speaking. So what I might do is go to hear from one of our colleagues here in the room and see if we can, I know it'll be hard to solve it in the meantime, but so what I might do is go to Isabelle. And Isabelle is with Action Against Hunger France, and she's actually just back from Yemen. She was there last week. And so she'll be able to focus on some of the concerns of her agency and the humanitarian situation there. So Isabelle, thank you for taking the first spot in the briefing.
Thank you very much. Good morning. So I'm Isabelle Moussard Carlsen. I'm the Operation Director for Action Against Hunger. And I was indeed in Yemen last week. I was visiting our teams and the work we're doing there. We are present in a number of locations in the country, from Laj and Abyan in the south, with our main office in Sana'a, but we also have programming activities in Hodeida and in Adja. I was lucky enough to actually have access to these different programs in the north, and especially spend time in Hodeida and in Adja. I also went to Aslam district, so that gave me a quite fairly wide perspective on the situation, especially that I was able to travel by road to all those locations, which is an interesting process in terms of what it means to access those locations and how all the impediments that we hear a lot about, how that is a reality in the ground especially for our team that work every day for the last 4 years trying to reach out to the population in dire needs. Obviously, being Action Against Hunger, my focus was on nutrition, and our activities in Yemen are very focused on nutrition. It's both treatment, but as well tackling all the underlying causes of undernutrition and malnutrition. The nutrition situation in Yemen continues to be extremely serious and catastrophic. The impact of the conflict, the impact on all the basic services, access to potable water, food security, but also health treatment, means that the situation of the malnutrition is continuing to, the figures are continuing to increase. And we're looking at a 2019 burden caseload of acute malnutrition among the children under 5 to further increase from what we were seeing in 2018. And to have a burden of over 2 million children affected by malnutrition. We see that the critical level of acute malnutrition are above 15% in some of the governorate, especially in Hodeida, Laj, Tais, Aden, and Adramot. So we're still looking at very, very high figures. This critical nutrition situation is really, you can really link it up to what I was saying in terms of access to basic services. We see that the destructions of the health services, the numerous attacks on hospitals and health posts. We also see that the attacks on all the water facilities have really increased the situation in terms of malnutrition. The scale-up of treatment of acute malnutrition and provision of critical health services and health care must be a priority. And the humanitarian community as a whole really need to target this aspect and ensure that funding will be present in the coming years and months to continue tackling those issues. One of the things that's really striking when in Yemen is access. And for me, it's really access of the population to those basic services. Once we've said that they have been destroyed, damaged, are not working efficiently anymore, we also know that the aid community and the humanitarian community has been extremely active trying to ensure that this extremely vulnerable population now still have access to these different aid and services. We need to continue advocate very strongly for that access, the population towards those services, but also for the humanitarian workers to be allowed to have a safe and permanent access. We have quite a lot of impediments in terms of reaching Yemen, and that starts with being able to actually enter the country with visa issues. And throughout my trip, I have seen the teams in country really having to struggle through authorization processes, and at each checkpoint, we will be asked for our documents. We will have to negotiate access. along the way. I must admit it was a fairly smooth process, but it was there. Every single checkpoint on the way, we were stopped, and we had to justify why we were traveling, where we were going, what we were going to do. So I think that a level of complexity in terms of access for the humanitarian community and for the people of Yemen is a real important element that we all need to keep in mind. And that brings me to probably my conclusion, as I have very little time left, but I think it is important that we, as an international community, realize that humanitarian aid in Yemen is not going to be the only solution or the solution to alleviate the suffering of the Yemeni people. I think we need to be very clear that we need a political solution to this conflict. And we need to make sure that the process is not relying only on the humanitarian actors and on the UN, but it's also the responsibility of every single member of the Security Council. And finally, this is the situation I've seen and I've witnessed for the whole week I was there, is that this is very real to the people of Yemen. It's an everyday struggle for these populations. It's also very real for our Yemeni colleagues working day and night to respond to those needs. And it's not going to disappear, and we need the international community to continue ensuring the support that we're providing to Yemen. We need to step up and make sure we're there to accompany this population and make sure that the worst case scenarios will not become a reality. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Isabelle. And indeed, the situation of nutrition and food insecurity has been very concerning in Yemen, and something that we've been able to highlight jointly as agencies. I believe that we are going to try to move forward again with our colleagues on Skype. So if I can see if Dina, can you hear me, Dina? Or Sukaina, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you very well.
Okay, great. If that's Sukaina, I believe that we have, I think we might turn to you. And I know that you are in Sana'a, and you're the communications officer with Save the Children. And you're going to speak to us a bit about the personal struggle of living in this conflict and some of your experiences. So if you can hear me well, we'd love to hear from you for the next 5 minutes or so, and we'll have a chance for questions at the end.
Sure. So yes, my name is Sukaina. I'm the Communications and Media Officer at Save the Children. I'm a Yemeni, and I have always been living in Yemen. I never got out. And I just became a mother to a 3-year-old boy during the crisis. So I kind of know how it is like to be a mother, a Yemeni living while your country is under attack, having an ongoing conflict, airstrikes, and the starvation, economic collapse, and then it goes on and on. The list in Yemen is very, very, very long, and it seems like we have it from every angle. As a mother, it hurts so much to have my child limited to everything he does. Everything is difficult in here, unfortunately. The school system is very poor, education is very poor in here, and I'm just glad I have a fixed salary that I can provide for my son, and make sure that he's happy, well fed, and he has a roof on top of his head, because in Yemen, a lot of families are struggling these days. I can just relate a little bit personally. So before the crisis, everybody in my family used to have a decent job. They're all well educated, and they had good salaries. But lately, at least all of them lost their jobs except 3 or 4. So it became a heavy lift. Remember, this is 78% of the entire population that is in vital need of humanitarian assistance. That's almost everybody we know. So friends, family, neighbors, everybody is struggling just to survive. And like I said, it feels, in Yemen, it feels like we're back in the Stone Age, where we worry about everything. We worry about electricity, we worry about fuel, we worry about clean water. And unfortunately, food is available in the market. It's not like it's not there. Food is available, but how to get it and how to purchase it and buy it when you don't have been paid for a very long time is a struggle. And then we have diseases that the world has stopped hearing about, like diphtheria, cholera, that is spreading widely and killing children in their fashions. So yeah, living in Yemen is a very, very heavy struggle. And I think the burden goes heavier on mothers because, and women, because they have to take care of the children and they have to pretend to be strong and not worried. And then at the same time, they have to go out searching for food and supplies and so on. So yeah, it's very difficult here.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
So we can hear you quite well, but not just because the sound isn't great. If you could just speak slowly, I think we'll have less feedback and we'll be able to hear you more clearly.
Okay, sure.
So if you could just, if you slow down a bit, I think it will help us to hear you.
Okay.
Thank you.
So yeah, so like I said, living in here, we have it from every angle. We struggle to have the basic needs provided for our families. We worry about electricity. We worry about clean water. We worry about food and just fuel. And it seems like we're living in the Stone Age, really, like I said, because you cannot imagine that you're in the 2019 and you still do not have basic supplies. I have met many families where they said they boil water and they just put on top of it spices and call this a meal because they simply cannot have a piece of bread or anything to eat. The health system is collapsing. The economy is terrible. And I think the silent killer is the starvation. And that's because of the high prices. The devaluation of the Yemeni rial has caused things to either double, or prices to either double or triple. And families cannot provide, especially when they have not been paid for a very, very long time. So the silent killer is a lot worse. And then on top of all that, we have airstrikes, we have on-ground conflict, we have preventable diseases that the world has talked about that are still spreading, killing thousands of people and children. So yeah, we have it from every angle in Yemen.
Thank you very much, Sukaina. Thank you for sharing your personal account as well. And I think we were able to hear you quite well, especially for that second half. So, and thanks for staying on the line. I'm sure there may be some questions directly for you. I think we'll move now to Hodeida, where we have our colleague Salem. Let me just check that you can hear me and we can hear you.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you well. So Salem is the head of the Hodeida office for Islamic Relief, and he's been there for the past 2 years.
Well, if you can hear me, this is Salem Baobaid from Hodeida. I'm the head of office Islamic Relief Hodeida, and I'm participating in this press brief to reflect the dire situation in Hodeida. Hodeida, naturally, it has been known that one of the coolest and the quietest and peaceful governorate in the country, but now by the all meaning, the humanitarian situation in Hodeida has become so bad, and it has been as it ever was since the escalation of the conflict in Hodeida. For quite several months, bombings, shellings accompanied by life-threatening starvation has made it a definite catastrophe. It will take much more than a ceasefire to start people living again in a peaceful situation. A large group of people living in a quite toxic area because they have already lost their homes. Delivering aid within this really high-risk situation in Hodeida has become a real-time challenge. It's one of the biggest challenge for us. Though the fighting has stopped, but security remains the greatest threat to our lives. Not more than a week, and not just a kilometer away from our office, one of our drivers got killed from a stray bullet while he was changing tire at a local workshop. Despite this high-risk situation, we know that people might die if we will not continue delivering the life-saving food assistance to so many people who are at the risk of starvation. And we kept delivering our assistance to these people to keep people living and eating, and at least give them a hope of living another day. Actually, all the team here are really determined to keep doing the good job in the humanitarian assistance despite the entire security risk. But we still remain scared because nobody guaranteed that, okay, he can go out and return back safe. Even our families are really scared about our safety, and they cannot guarantee that, okay, we leave home in the morning and they don't know if they can see us again back in the evening or not. But we keep doing our job to keep people get assistance. Actually, we are operating in nutrition intervention through so many health centers and feeding centers, and it seems that, okay, when you go around the feeding centers, you will come across a heartbreaking condition of highly malnourished children and breastfeeding mothers. They are barely breathing. They are barely breathing. They are barely moving. And they have utterly exhausted mothers from lack of food. For instance, I can mention an 11-month-old girl called Faiza. I came across her just a few days ago when she turned up into one of our feeding center, and she was only 5 kilograms. She was only 5 kilograms, and she has wide opened eyes staring out of the balls, and she has a really exhausted mother. And Faiza is not the only girl who is suffering the malnutrition here. Faiza is only just one of more than 400,000 children who are suffering from the same condition and from a life-threatening condition here in Hodeida. We still see grown people as well, carried by friends and relatives because they are so badly affected by hunger, tired and dehydrated. None of this has changed. People has grown some sort of hope when the ceasefire started back sometimes in December. But this ceasefire has not...
Salem, if you can hear me, I'll just ask you to wrap up in the next minute.
Hello?
Salem, what I think we'll do is, I don't know if we've lost your audio there, but I might thank you for your remarks and move on to Dina, if we have her.
Can you hear me?
Yeah. If you want to close with any final remarks, Salem, and then we might move on to our next speaker, just so that we move through everyone.
Hello?
Okay.
You're cutting out.
Dina? Are you able to hear us or no?
I can hear you, but you're cutting out.
Okay, why don't you go ahead, Dina? So Dina is joining us from Sana, and she's OXFAM's head of policy and advocacy, and we can also give you full names afterwards. But Dina, go ahead. If we can hear you, let's move forward.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. So yes, what I wanted to say about the situation here, what we're dealing with is, yes, in terms of the ceasefire, we have a situation where airstrikes have stopped, the front lines have not moved, but the ongoing conflict in terms of the ground shelling, etc., that is still continuing, and that's when we start in Hodeida, it's still continuing, and in other parts of the country, we are still having a situation where airstrikes are going, ground level fighting is continuing, particularly some areas such as Hajjah, the situation has been worsening, the conflict situation has been worsening, and we have seen that in relation to bigger and greater number of IDPs, but then in addition to that, in terms of our own ability to reach IDPs that we have been able to reach in the past. One example of that is in Bani Hassan IDP camp. Now, those IDPs have been in Bani Hassan camp since 2009 and 2010 because of the conflict that raged between the Houthis and the government at that time. So they have been in IDP camp for large numbers of years, but now, since we have not been having the access that we need to them, we understand that they have now started to move from those areas. The conflict is moving along as well in these parts, in this part of the country. So that's it. And the situation is also no different in, let's say, Awssan, or in parts even of Dale, and then also in parts of Taiz as well. So generally, yes, while we're seeing that situation in Hodeida has calmed down in relation to what we've had before in previous. It's by no means something that we can say is ceasefire across the country, and this is why, as OXFAM, we're calling for ceasefire that would, in the least, enable us to reach those in need, and also to stop or to limit the flow of IDPs as well. One other thing that I wanted to mention is the food insecurity. And this is something that is not only linked to sort of front lines in the conflict, but also is linked, we can see it visibly, clearly, even in places are not in the front line of the conflict. So, for example, even in areas of the south, such as Adala, etc., and Lahj as well, we have seen levels of malnutrition amongst children, some of them acute as well. And this has actually been, is not one of the cases, isolated cases. We have gone village after village in these governments. These are in some parts of the governments which are hard to reach areas. These are governments that have suffered from neglect for a long time. And people tell us the only thing that we eat is bread and plain tea, no milk. Those children, they said, they have not had milk for some time. And they said that they basically have in each village 3 to 5 children who have suffered from malnutrition at some point. And then the number of children who have malnutrition is about 10 to 15 in each of these villages. And whenever we ask, everyone pinpoints the conflict as the main driver for this insecurity, for this food insecurity. And also what they have also particularly mentioned is that since June of 2018, and because of the currency collapse, their lives have become a lot more difficult. They are in a situation where the food insecurity has increased as a result of the collapse in the economy, collapse in the currency. And even now, where we have seen the currency sort of recovered a little bit, we're not seeing that recovery translating in improvement in the economic situation or even reduction in price of food. So the vulnerability remains as it is for those people, because even where the prices have gone down, they have gone down very limited in comparison with the drop that we faced back in June of last year. And this is why in OXFAM we are calling that for the country, not just to have this countrywide ceasefire, but then also there is a need for a holistic humanitarian approach, and also for need to have as well the political solution to the problem, because at the end of the day, all of the insecurity, the levels of insecurity that we have seen are all linked to the conflict. And unless the conflict is resolved, we will continue to find people going further down in levels of food insecurity we have not been able to imagine before, and levels of fragility that we have not seen before.
Thank you, Dina. Thank you very much for your remarks. So if our colleagues on the line, if you could stay with us as possible. We have two more interventions here that we'll have from our colleagues in the room, and then we'll go to questions. So I'll move to Akram now, who's a Yemeni researcher and an activist, and also a Save the Children champion. Akram, over to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me here. Basically, as you know, I'm a Yemeni citizen, but have been living in the UK for the last 7 years. And what I would like to talk today about is about Yemen, but about the most important thing that is happening in Yemen into 2019. So I would say, yes, Yemen has a lot of needs when it comes to the humanitarian crisis, but humanitarian crisis is not the only problem that we have. It's the political elite in Yemen and with its backers as well. So now Yemeni people and the Yemeni community here in the UK, because by the way, I'm the representative of the independent Yemeni diaspora in the UK as well. So the most important and precious commodity thing in Yemen now is peace, because what Yemeni people are witnessing that has become commodity in the sense that it has been traded by local and regional and international actors. So it's tit for tat. So if you don't give us this, we will not give you peace, we will not give you prosperity, we will not give you humanitarian needs, and we will not lift the blockade either in Hodeida or in Sana'a or anywhere in Yemen. So this is an issue for us. And Yemeni people, my colleagues have talked about humanitarian needs. I'm not going to talk only about the humanitarian needs, but I'm going to talk about the whole integrated approach that Yemeni people are looking for. This is one of the wants and needs that they want you to help them and to draw some kind of attention when it comes to this. So Yemeni community would like you and to use your power and your influence to support them when it comes to provide that integrated approach from the UK government across all the departments of the UK governments when it comes to FCO, DFID, and as well as the Department for International Trade. So if both of the three departments are working together, when it comes, DFID is supporting Yemen massively, but comparing to selling arms is only peanuts in 2017 and 2018 especially, and as well as FCO. It's about policy, it's about influence, because UK is the pen holder when it comes to the Security Council. And we have seen Jeremy Hunt is proactive when it comes to this. So more support from the 14 NGOs here. You have all the power, you have all the resources there. And as well as trying to influence the Department of International Trade to ease up and to make sure that there is a rigorous system in place when it comes to selling arms to Saudi Arabia. So, but when it comes to The situation in Yemen is, prior to the war in Yemen, or to the man-made crisis in Yemen, 25% of the youth, in Yemen, were unemployed. And now, over 3 years, there is no wages. And this has caused or led to devastating consequences. And children, Yemeni children in Yemen, they have many needs. And prior to the war, even after the war, some of them have their own special needs when it comes to problems, autistic problems, malnourished, etc. So to wrap up, I would say this is Yemeni people don't want to live in a stateless country, and we don't want to end up like what happened in Somalia in the 90s. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Akram. So we'll move on to our final speaker before we open the floor for questions. So Awssan Kamal works for OXFAM in the Rights in Crisis campaign, and he was born in Yemen and is now based here, here in the UK, and has worked on a number of humanitarian emergencies. So Awssan, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for everyone who came online from Yemen. I know how difficult that is working inside the country. Oxfam is currently operating in 6 governorates across the country. We have reached around 3 million people in the past 4 years, nearly 4 years now. And I'm sorry about the feedback and about my dyslexia, because I'll jump around a little bit, and hopefully I'll be able to clarify more as we go through the questions. It is a dire situation in the country. It's something what I like to call a prison without walls. Yemen has been going through these shocks for the past 20 years. This is not a new humanitarian crisis. Prior to the humanitarian crisis that we are going through at the moment, due to the current escalation in the conflict in 2015, there were already 14 million people in the country who needed the humanitarian support that the international and local organizations are trying to provide, with all the access impediments that my colleagues were talking about. We are talking about 10 days to get a permit to go from one area to another for both our international and national staff. It is a very, very difficult situation to navigate around, all the way from trying to get a car from one area to another, and from a visa perspective to try to get some of our international staff into the country. It is so difficult. The only way into Sana'a, where most of our offices are, or our head offices are as international agencies, is via a UN chartered flight. And you can imagine how difficult that is. So from an operational perspective, it is very, very difficult for our organizations to continue its operations, but we are doing our best to continue to serve those people we need. A few things that I wanted to go through, and I think I'm not going to go through all the big numbers, but we have to recognize that this is a really dire situation for the majority of the people. I mean, my son and my wife are currently in Aden. I have sent them in by choice because they needed to see their family after 4 years, but it became really, really difficult. It takes about 3 days, with 2 days transit in Egypt, for a normal Yemeni to get back into the country. Now you can imagine how difficult it is for someone who is in Sana'a at the moment, who's suffering from any kind of health medical condition that needs to be seen outside the country, for them to travel 10 hours by road through all the checkpoints to Aden Airport, which is the only operational, Aden and Sayoun, the 2 only operational airports to have international flights, to then try to get a ticket, which is a really hard thing to get on the national airlines, and then to be able to go to Egypt or Jordan to be able to receive that medical attention. It is really difficult for normal people to get out there and to be able to get the right medical attention. For us as an organization, what we see on the ground, I was there quite a long while ago now. It's been about 1 year and 3 months since I left the country last. But it was astonishing to see the level of damage to infrastructure at that local level. Traveling from Sana'a to Amran, which is about 50 to 60 kilometers, I saw at least 8 institutions damaged. And when I say institutions, I'm talking about from seeing a bombed out warehouse, to seeing a factory, to seeing a sports center, to seeing a a football field for children in that local area, which was bombed out. So it's diverse how the situation and the infrastructure has been hit inside the country. Oh, I've also seen bridges and roads bombed out, which is quite interesting. But that was on a different route and not the one to Amran. So it's really interesting how things are developing. At the moment, I think the colleagues have already given you an overview of that. One of the things that we really need to think about is how starvation is stigmatized inside the local communities in Yemen. So the local communities don't really want to talk about how hungry they are, and it's because of this natural thing as Yemenis of not wanting to talk about it and not wanting to show it. So a lot of these children are really going into this proudness within the community of not wanting. Oh, have I lost it? This proudness within the community of not wanting to kind of talk about how hungry they are within those communities. So we're finding it very, very difficult to extract that information. But taking that into account, we are talking about a food basket that costs 150% more than what it used to cost. We're talking about villagers and people who work on farms who are now having to pay extortionate amounts of money for fuel to be able to irrigate their land. We're talking about failing crops. It's a really difficult situation in the country that people are having to deal with. I think those are the main points. The last thing I was just going to touch on is the conflict is not isolated to certain areas, and I think my colleague earlier on said that there are still different front lines across the country, including in Taiz and in the south of the country, and people are suffering there. I was speaking to another humanitarian organization only a few weeks ago who told me it now takes them 7 hours to get from outside Taiz into Taiz. Now that's a 40-minute journey that I used to personally make. And that journey is just unbelievable for children and women who try to go to get in or out of the city. And some of those people are making those journeys on a daily basis just to be able to go and buy their food or to get water and come back into the city. I'll stop there.
Thank you. So we're going to open up for questions. And I think one of those final points we just heard is something that we highlighted as these 14 agencies in the joint letter that we've put out. Really, it's that aid and commercial goods are just not flowing at the level that is needed to address need. And when we hear some of those practical examples and hear from the many colleagues about that difficulty of moving around, and the impact on the humanitarian situation is so significant, and that's something that we're all facing. So we're going to open up for questions. So I'm assuming someone will also tell us if we hear questions from outside of the room, but just looking around from here, would anyone like to ask a question? We have one here in the front, please. And if you could, the microphone's coming to you, and if you could introduce yourself, that would be very, very helpful.
My name's Patrick Winter, I work for The Guardian. Are the people we were listening to from...
Do we still have the colleagues on Skype? I'm seeing at the back, I think that we do. Yeah, I think they're still there.
Could I ask the gentleman from Islamic Relief who's in Hodeida how much he feels the ceasefire is being breached in the area, and whether he is able to attribute responsibility for why these breaches are occurring?
Salem, are you there?
Hello?
We have a question regarding the ceasefire and if that's been upheld, and the challenges around if it is not being upheld.
Where?
We can hear you, but just very, very faintly. So if there's any way to be louder, and if you got the question. Okay, I think. Salem? Okay, we'll have to try to come back, I think, on that one, unless anyone else wants to comment on that. Anyone here in the room? Apologies for that. We'll keep trying, and we can also follow up directly afterwards. Absolutely, we can have a direct line to those colleagues as needed. Oh, I can see. Let me try one more time. Salem, can you hear us? I can see you on the screen in the back of the room. Yeah, we can hear you.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, so the question, I'm not sure if you heard it, but the question was about the ceasefire from our colleague. If that ceasefire is being upheld, and in the case that it's not, if you could comment on that as well.
Is on hold or not? Is that right?
Yeah, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Well, okay. The ceasefire, since when it went into effect, the ceasefire was a bit hope to the most people here in Hodeida, and people were having a good indication of very good days to come in a very few weeks' time. But after quite some weeks, the ceasefire has become some sort of the same dreams and the same story, where the humanitarian situation on the ground remains the same. It's still worse, and people are still suffering. And the ceasefire has turned to be a fragile ceasefire, where there are sporadic exchange of fire between the parties, and nobody knows where exactly. But we can hear from our location here that especially for the last couple of days there was some sort of gunfire exchange between the parties, and people start worrying about how the ceasefire will come up with a resolution that will better the situation in the city port of Hodeida. On the other side, the expected port operation that to start at least partially to relieve the burden of food scarce from the market has not been affected, because still food are really scarce in the market. And yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. We heard you well there, and I know that Awssan would actually like to add to that question.
I just want to say that we are really concerned by the fact that imports are not allowed to get in as they were. And we are absolutely concerned by the fact that certain commercial importers aren't able to get their goods into the country. Lately, we've heard of the news of the bombing of the Red Sea silos, the grain silos in Hodeida, which was absolutely concerning, and would impede the delivery of food to the local markets. This impacts the secondary and tertiary markets in ways that we're not able to measure at the moment, and that's really important to kind of just have in the back of our heads as we talk about the ceasefire in Hodeida.
Thank you. And Isabelle?
Just to add that while I was there for 2 days and 2 nights, I actually heard shelling almost every night during the time I was there. So I think that's a good indicator that the ceasefire has its limits.
Who's doing the shelling?
Sorry, please go ahead.
Karen, it's from ITV. I just wondered who was doing the shelling that you were hearing. Don't know?
Don't know.
Can't say?
No, but there was definitely shelling.
Other questions from colleagues? And is there anyone, do we need to check? I mean, I'm happy to sum up and close, but I just want to check. One more time? No. So I think we'll close today, and just close to the hour, which is good. So as you know, across these 14 agencies, we're all available to provide further information. We really appreciate the attendance and the attention that came today to look at this humanitarian crisis. And I think that what we heard from all of these colleagues and what we also highlighted in the letter is that there is such an exacerbation of so many different humanitarian issues that we are seeing here. And so it's for that very unfortunate reason that it is the worst humanitarian crisis in the world. So we're available for follow-up, and you're very welcome to stay here with us to have a coffee and to chat. And thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.